Good evening, members. Just ask Reverend Edwards to say a few words for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Good evening, everyone. Money is a special focus for this evening's meeting. One of the most misquoted verses in the Bible is, "Money is the root of all evil." I hardly need to tell you that you can do a tremendous lot of good with money if you invest it wisely. The actual verse from 1 Timothy 6 is, "The love of money is the root of all kinds of evil." So in our prayers this evening, I invite you to join me in praying that we would always seek to love not money, but our neighbours as ourselves, the people whom we've been called to serve. So let us pray. We thank you, O God, for this district and for all those who serve it in so many different ways. When we cannot fight alone for truth and justice, help us to draw strength from one another. When we cannot unite on every detail of policy or belief, help us to work together for limited objectives. When we cannot agree with our neighbours, help us still to love them. Draw us together this evening in a fellowship of service. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Thank you very much. Members, please be seated. Okay, good evening, members. Item number 2, apologies for absence.
Chairman, I have apologies for absence from Councillor John Brown and Councillor Mick Skills Senior. Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 3, minutes. Council was asked to approve as a correct record the minutes of the meeting held on Tuesday the 22nd of January. Agreed. Thank you, members. Item number 4, declarations of interest. Do we have any that are relevant to the agenda this evening?
Chairman, if I may.
Please.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I remind members that the monitoring officer sent her annual guidance by email on the 31st of January to advise all members about the issue of council tax arrears and declarations of interest as the budget is on the agenda tonight. Thank you.
No indication. I'll move on. Item number 5, announcements by the Chairman. I have none this evening. Item number 6, announcements by the Chief Executive. None. Item number 7, statement by the Leader of the Council. There is none this evening. Item number 8, statements by members of the Cabinet. We have none this evening. Item number 9, report of the Cabinet A1. Councillor Stock.
Chairman, actually, I'm just thinking I should move the recommendation first, shouldn't I? Get a second. Can I move the recommendation, Chairman, on page 11? 12?
11.
12. 11 and 12, Chairman, as printed.
And the seconder?
Chairman, I'm happy to second that and I reserve my right to speak.
Thank you, Chairman. In introducing the budget report tonight, Mr. Chairman, I will repeat the words I used when the budget was considered by Cabinet on the 18th of January. That this is a good, honest budget. There were no frills. This is simply a budget crafted to enable us to carry on being the outstanding local authority that we have become over the past few years, leading our communities, delivering high-quality services for our residents, and helping our businesses to prosper and our visitor numbers to soar. But then again, that was always the ambition at the heart of our long-term approach to the budget that we were brave enough to adopt last year. We talked about the need to keep delivering against the new long-term approach to build confidence in it. 2018-19 was delivered, and we are presented tonight with a budget that delivers again for 2019-20. It is important to highlight that we have already set aside significant amounts of money to keep moving our priorities forward. These are not reserves. This is money we have allocated and are about to spend on major projects that will greatly enhance and benefit this district. For example, over £2 million for business investment and growth, over £1 million for office transformation, £1 million for public realm projects in Harwich, £2.5 million for homes in Jaywick Sands, including support from within the housing revenue account, £4.6 million for cliff stabilisation work, over £1 million for digital transformation. These are bold and ambitious projects because we are a bold and ambitious council. I notice that the argument about the size of local authority reserves appears to have resurfaced again, at least in the emails of one member. Now, banks and building societies are required by legislation to hold reserves as a prudent measure to protect them from future shocks. Any large business will do the same. But when councils take the same prudent approach, there will always be someone trying to suggest we should be spending the cash and leave nothing to fall back on. Chairman, to give just one example, and there must be thousands of others, we have the longest coastline of any district in the country, and I don't need to remind members of the sometimes tragic events that have befallen this area due to our proximity to the sea. As the Housing Authority, it is our legal duty to provide emergency housing for people displaced from their homes due to a calamity such as a catastrophic flooding event. That could be thousands of people made homeless, and it could be for months or even years that they need alternative accommodation. Without adequate reserves, we would simply not be able to meet those legal obligations, and our residents would be left abandoned and homeless. Our reserves would play an absolutely vital role in supporting us through any such scenario. The balance we're trying to find is to spend the one-off money we do have on things that either raise money, save money, or protect us from increased costs. This seems both logical and pragmatic. Chairman, these are not just warm words. Examples to demonstrate our genuine commitment to this approach are the Office Transformation Project and the changes we have made to the waste and recycling contract, which together will save the Council in excess of £500,000 per year. £500,000 that will support frontline services next year, the year after, and for the future. This has surely got to be good news for the users of our frontline services. I do appreciate the various comments on the waste service, but what I cannot accept is that the changes to the contract are a cut in service. If we carried on with the existing contract, the additional cost to this council would be close to £500,000 per year. Instead, we have invested in a redesigned service that provides a revised collection methodology, with residents still having access to the same quality service where recyclables are collected from their doorsteps along with residual waste in a safer and more efficient way. This is good management of the Council's available resources and one that protects frontline services. We are keeping weekly collections, we are moving to wheelie bins, which many residents have been demanding for years now, and we are saving shed loads of cash. I have also heard people voice concerns about the proposed £5 increase to council tax. Let me take this opportunity to set out the context of this proposal. The government has reduced funding to this council by over £7 million over the last few years. Their delayed response to this was to allow councils the opportunity to increase council tax by £5, thereby recognising the pressure in the system. So we are faced with a simple choice, and it's a choice we do have to face. We can increase council tax by £5, or we can make some pretty savage cuts to frontline services to make up for the loss of £300,000 per year from our budget. It's a simple choice, Chairman, it's just not a very nice one. When we set out our long-term approach to the forecast, we stated that we wanted to protect frontline services as far as possible. The £5 increase is only one ingredient to the overall budget, and it is a compromise we have to make to help deliver on this promise. Let's not forget we still have one of the lowest levels of council tax in Essex, and we are in the bottom quartile nationally. This leads me on to another point, and I'll try not to get too technical here, but the government has suggested that when they agree a fair funding settlement for councils from next year, they will take into account the level of income raised locally from council tax. However, they will not make a deduction based on the level of income actually raised locally, but it will be a deduction based on a notional council tax level determined on a national level. If our level of council tax is lower than this notional amount, then we will perversely lose out, as the amount deducted from our funding settlement will be more than the figure we actually raise locally. I'm not saying the tail should wag the dog, but perversely having a lower level of council tax going forward will probably have an adverse impact in future years, which could require more savings to be found in future than would otherwise be the case. Who says public sector funding is boring? We all have to stay alert to such subtleties in the system, as they could have an impact on our overall financial position in future years. And Chairman, it is also a truth universally acknowledged that local authorities who do not take advantage of the flexibilities to increase council tax, but then complain to government about the financial pressures on local services, will simply be told, well, you should have increased council tax, you've only yourselves to blame. And I say that with no joy whatsoever, Chairman. I am instinctively a Conservative. I believe in low taxation and minimal state interference. I believe that people know how to spend their money better than governments do. But I also realise and accept that as a local authority we have a job to do. Services to deliver, communities to lead and businesses to support. We play a vital role in the lives of the residents of this district, and we are a force for good. And the simple fact is that running a large local authority like this one does cost money. However, based on all that I've just said, I think the £5 increase is the right balance and the most financially prudent thing to do in the long term. Let's not forget we will be protecting frontline services by doing so. Chairman, as I said last year, the evidence is there to show that as a council we will always find new ways and different approaches to deliver our services, a challenge we have lived up to in the past and one we will continue to going forward. We constantly punch above our weight and I can see no reason why this should change. We continue to work closely with government on a number of issues, such as supporting the Jowick Sands project. It's great to see the various strands of that work finally coming together, and it genuinely feels that we are as close as we have ever been to making the long-lasting changes so desperately needed to lift the area out of the difficulties it has faced over so many generations. I think the government are now getting the same feeling, and they've asked us what they can do to support our plans. We need to be honest but pragmatic and put our points forward, most of which do not necessarily need the government to put their hand in their pocket. They are more about technical and legalistic issues, such as the time limit placed on right to buy capital receipts retained locally, which do not help us formulate a longer-term plan. We are being listened to, and one reason why is that the government see us as a can-do council. That's a reputation we want to keep delivering against, not just in words, but in what happens on the ground, as that is where we will be judged by our residents, our businesses and our visitors. Chairman, I'll quickly return to the purpose of the long-term approach to the forecast we've adopted before I finish with some comments about the members and officers here at the Council. One of the major successes that the long-term approach could deliver when we do finally emerge from one of the toughest financial environments that local authorities have ever been faced with is that the level of services we currently provide have been protected as far as possible. Sometimes success is dressed up in different clothing, and some people may not see this as overly ambitious within a long-term plan. Success is relative, and such a judgment will be made by comparing this council with how other local authorities have fared across the same period. When this day arrives, I genuinely believe that we will be up there with the best and continue to be there for our residents. We are here to provide an extensive range of public services, and I hope that that range will be as extensive as possible and of the quality expected of us. Members and officers will continue to work hand in hand to make this possible. Whatever happens, we must keep up the enthusiasm that is clearly there amongst us all to carry on making a difference. Let's carry on with the good and honest debates that make well-informed decisions, that are supported by our excellent officers that we are fortunate enough to have behind us on this council. I've really enjoyed cabinet meetings over the last year, Chairman, as people have really engaged and made useful and helpful contributions. This can only be a good thing for the council as a whole, an approach that would be expected of us by the people we serve. I sincerely hope that this carries on after the elections in May, and we can look forward to constructive and pragmatic discussions during cabinet meetings long into the future. Chairman, I call all members to support the 2019-20 budget that is being proposed and vote in favour of it tonight. Thank you.
Well done.
Anybody wish to speak? Councillor Henderson.
Thank you, Chairman. I will respond. First of all, before I do respond, I was a bit disappointed not to hear about the big wedge of money that our MPs obviously achieved for voting for Brexit, the 35,000 that we've just received as his reward for his bribe for voting for Theresa May's deal. there was no mention of that.
Let's keep it about tendering and less about bribes. Thank
That
you.
is tendering. That's a £35,000 for tendering. Chairman, the headline of this is really, and the leader actually said it, and at the end of the day, it is his party and it is his leader that has actually put councils in the breakpoint position that they're in up and down the country. He said for himself, they've actually taken £7 million out of local people's funds to keep funding services in this area. And the reason they've done that is they made a decision that they were going to come up with a fair funding formula. No fair funding formula, just the money taken from the council. They were going to come up with a business rate retention scheme. No business rate retention scheme, just take more money from the council. They say they're going to come up with a prosperity growth fund to take place of the European social grants and all the grants that Europe's been giving us. We haven't heard a word about that. Yet we're heading for 2020 with a zero amount of money coming from this government. They have put councils up and down this country and the public at breaking point up and down this country. And whether we like it or not, we can say how well we're working. When you look around the communities up and down this country, you can see the impact of those cuts have had on those areas. Now, quickly going to the budget. 328,000 of savings. And I'll take you to page 20, where it actually says, and I said this at the Cabinet meeting, there's £100,000 being saved there on staff vacancies. Now, I'm really concerned about that. Year on year, we're making savings by keeping vacancies open. The way we do that, I'm concerned, is that staff in our departments are under pressure already, and that will also put our services under pressure by keeping those vacancies open. And yes, there will be questions asked when you look at the reserves. When you look at the reserves for the forecast risk fund, which is now going up to, by 2020, 2.9 million. And on the same page, you look at a building for the future reserve, which has gone up from 55,000 to 2.9 million again. And then you look at resident-free parking reserve, 221,000 there in reserves. Yet we're making £348,000 cut, a £28,000 cut. And we're actually keeping vacancies open when we could be supporting our staff and the services that they deliver. And we've also seen, and I'll make this pledge now, if ever we have chance after May election to work with any party in this council chamber, we will replace the big society. We'll call it something else because the big society is a total failure. We will put back money that supports local good causes, local charities within our area to make sure they've got the support from this council they need. I see in that budget that money's been taken away and not replaced. I think that's terrible. We've got no money now to support all those voluntary sectors who are having more and more pressures put on them all the time. But we will support this budget very quickly because it's got the things that Labour in the past has put forward. The Small Schemes Growth Fund was a proposal from the Labour group in this chamber and accepted by the administration. The Careline Lifting Service was a fund and a budget put forward by this side and this Labour group, which is very successful now and providing a fantastic service for those people on those Careline services, put forward by this Labour group. And yes, the leader did say there's over £1 million there, £1.4 million there for public realm services for our town centres. Yes, we do support that. And because those are in that budget, we do blame the government for putting councils in the position they're in. We do recognise the impact that cuts are having within our communities, but we will support this budget because it's the only way that we can go forward at the moment because of the position the government's put us in. Thank you.
Very much, Councillor Henderson. Councillor Gugliani or Councillor Stock?
Chairman, I won't prolong the agony. I thank Councillor Henderson for saying he'll support the budget at least. The £35,000 to which he referred at the beginning of his comments, I don't think is being given to either of the MPs, and I'm not sure specifically which one he was talking about. I think that's something that all district councils will be getting, the grand and princely sum of £35,000 to help us deal with Brexit. Quite how far that will go, I have been joking about, and I probably shouldn't make jokes about it, but I have been. Answers on a postcard, please, as to what we could spend that on. But it's not a great deal of money to deal with the implications of Brexit, whatever they are. In respect of the rest of the budget, yes, £7 million has been taken out of the revenue support grant by central government. I was very clear on that in my speech, and I always have been, and I don't support it. As I've said many times and for many years, government, frankly, of all colours, just don't seem to understand local government, or they're scared of local government. They're afraid of giving local government the power that local government needs to be able to get on with the job of serving the communities that they represent. And if the people don't like the decisions we make, they can kick us out again. That's democracy. Unfortunately, we have too many shackles and restrictions and conditions placed upon us. I'm kind of happy that they've stopped giving us a revenue support grant. They do need to give some kind of funding back, because the tax that the government have to spend comes from people in tendering, remember, through paying for things than VAT, through fuel duty, through income tax, through national insurance contributions, all the ways that we pay tax every time we make a single financial transaction of any kind. So it is our money the government have got, and we don't seem to get a fair share of it. I'd agree with Ivan if that was the point he was making. But this is a good budget. It's a good, sensible budget that carries on delivering for the residents of this district, that carries on helping to tendering to be recognised as one of the best district councils in the country, which is a position we simply weren't in a few years ago, and we clearly are in now. So, Chairman, without any further ado, I'm happy to commend this budget to Council, and I hope we have full support for it. Thank you.
Chairman, in accordance with the legislative requirements, all budgets are named votes. So I will read out the name, and please say whether you're for, against or abstain. Thank you. Okay, apologies, members, for the delay. Councillor Alexander. Councillor Amos. Councillor Baker. Councillor Bennison. Councillor Bray. Councillor Broderick. Councillor B.E. Brown. Councillor M. Brown. Councillor Buke. Councillor Bush. Councillor Callender. Councillor Calver. Councillor Cawthron. Councillor Chapman. Councillor Chittock. Councillor Coley. Councillor Cousins. Councillor Davis. Councillor Everett. Councillor Fairley. Councillor Ferguson. Councillor Fowler. Councillor Gray. Councillor Griffiths. Councillor G. Guglielmi. Councillor V. Guglielmi. Councillor Heaney. Councillor I. Henderson. Councillor J. Henderson. Councillor P. Honeywood. Councillor S. Honeywood. Councillor Khan. Councillor King. Councillor Land. Councillor McWilliams. Councillor Miles. Councillor Newton. Councillor Nichols. Councillor Pemberton. Councillor Platt. Councillor Punian. Councillor Raby. Councillor Scott. Councillor M.J. Skills. Councillor Steady. Councillor Stevenson. Councillor Stock. Councillor Talbot. Councillor Turner. Councillor Watson. Councillor White. Councillor Whitmore. Councillor Winfield. Councillor Yallop. Thank you, members. The result is 54, 3 against, 1 abstention and 6 not present. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Item number 10, urgent matters for debate. There are none. Not particularly. Date of the next scheduled meeting is Tuesday the 26th of March. Thank you very much. Good evening to you all.
Please be upstanding.